Hello, friends. This is Jonathan at the Piano Lesson, and got a good lesson for you today. In case you haven't been watching this channel ever, just gonna tell you beforehand, there's gonna be no slick videos. I'm not gonna teach you how to play a rap song. We're gonna learn music. I don't teach pieces, okay, per se. Yes, I do teach songs on occasion, or more than on occasion, but I want to give you what they call the keys to the kingdom, okay? I want to help unlock the mysteries of music so you can play whatever you want. And I want to teach you how to learn. Over the years, I've had people say to me, gosh, you're the smartest person I know. And I'm not sure how to take that. But I'm not so sure I'm the smartest person, but I might be the best student that they know. I think I'm a pretty good student, which might make me the smartest person. I don't know. But it's not just what you learn, but how you learn things. So last week we were discussing tetrachords and the 8 different types of tetrachords that there are, and how those are the building blocks for music. And my good buddy Francesco asked a question, and he said, that's all well and good, and I love that lesson, but what's in it for me? How do I apply this stuff? Okay. Everyone wants to know how to apply this. So how do you apply it? By playing songs? Okay. Yes. So what's the difference between a scale and a song? Well, it's really all perception, okay? Here's a scale, right? Right, that's a scale. Here's a song, Joy to the World. Right, exact same notes, right? But it's long, long, short, long, short, long, long, long. That's what makes it the song, right? Now, in the real world, I don't think we encounter scales quite as neat and tidy as that, but it's sure a lot easier to play music when you approach it with a concept rather than trying to manage each note. So the tetrachord groups that we were learning, which make up scale, so that scale is made of 2 major tetrachords. They're disjunct tetrachords, meaning that they don't share notes. But they act as, and here's the word I'm going to use. So they act as a heuristic. And I'm just double checking the spelling because I'm not always the greatest speller in the world, but Heuristic. A heuristic. So a heuristic meaning kind of a rule of thumb to solving a problem. That's what we mean by a heuristic. So imagine, you have a Swiss Army knife. And by the way, I would like someone to explain to me, why is it that every Swiss Army knife has a toothpick? What are the Swiss doing with the toothpicks? Is it for the fondue? I just want to know. Anyway, depending on the Swiss Army knife, I have by the way, I will show you my favorite Swiss Army knife. I have this Swiss Army knife. Voila! It's a very modest little knife, but I love this knife. And I would tell you why I love this knife. It is not because of the knife. It is because of the screwdriver, the Phillips head screwdriver. Yes, the other version of this knife has a corkscrew. So if you were a wino, that's the one you would want. I am not. So I find I use the the Phillips head screwdriver more than anything else. And it's a great screwdriver. I mean, it really has held up over the years. And yeah, and then the knife is great. The blades are great. The other thing I actually use, I use the flathead screwdriver. I think that's very useful. There is a wire stripper on here, by the way, this little notch here, which is quite useful. The toothpick I never use. The tweezers I never use. They're probably very useful if you have thick eyebrows. And The other thing I do use quite often is the can opener, which I've used as a Boy Scout. That can opener is foolproof. So I don't know if you've noticed, but I've tried many different can openers in my life, and they're quite difficult to use. This thing always works. And there's another screwdriver on top. So more for the screwdrivers, really. And I will just add one other quick thing, which I recently acquired. I was very excited about. I acquired this teeny tiny little adjustable wrench. And I thought to myself, you know, I'm never going to use this, but when I do use it, I will sure be glad that I have it with me. And you know what? A few days after I bought this, I actually used it to fix my car. I just didn't happen to have the right wrench. I had, you know, an 8mm, a 10mm, I don't know what it was, but this actually got the job done. And I was so happy that I had it. You know, it was just a few bucks. So it's the same thing with the Tetrachords. You know, you may not use them all the time, but you'll be so happy that you have them to solve musical problems with. So let's look at the song that we were working on last week. We were talking about Blue Bossa. And Blue Bossa, right? So that's the melody, right? It starts on the G. It's in the key of C minor. That's C minor, F minor, G, 1, 4, 5, 1, right? And just as an aside, you will notice in life, when you play music, that typically, whatever key you're in, the melody will almost always, 90% of the time, 85, 90% of the time, will always start on the root, the third, or the fifth. And that's in a minor key. Now, this encompasses an octave. That's not as common an interval, by the way, in music. You know what song encompasses an octave? Right, Somewhere Over the Rainbow. That's how you kind of learn octaves. But right, so that's the basic melody. Well, that melody is the C minor scale, right? That's the C natural minor scale, relative major is E flat, 3 flats. Typically we don't do that, we do this. That's why you have the melodic minor and they changed ascending and descending. But typically the tetrachord that you would associate with that scale, the C, D, E flat, F, G, A flat, B flat, C. Okay, so that's the two tetrachords. That's the minor, right? And this is the Phrygian tetrachord, because the half step is there and the half step is there. That's your half steps. Okay, these intervals are always the same. Those are always perfect fourths. All right. Right. So when you go to approach this tune, you approach it knowing that you have basically 2 ideas as opposed to 8 different notes. Now, if we're starting on G actually, well, then the whole thing kind of changes, doesn't it? Because now we kind of have a mode of the minor scale. So we have G, A, B, C, G, A flat rather, G, A flat, B flat, C. Okay, so there's our, that's our Phrygian. That's our Phrygian mode. And then we have that, D, E flat, F, and G. Well, what is that? Well, that is also a Phrygian. It's also a Phrygian mode. There's our half steps, between 1 and 2. Those are our half steps. So even though Blue Bossa is in the key of it's in the key of C minor, what we're hearing is really what? It's really a Phrygian scale. This entire it's really a Phrygian mode is what we're listening to, okay? So when you approach the piece, this piece, you want to approach it with, we were using the word heuristic, right? This rule of thumb. Yes, the piece is in the key of C, but really G is the analog, the word analog, not the opposite of digital, but the word analog meaning a, not duplicate of, but a mirroring of, let's say. So I have a term that I use in music. I call it a point of leverage, but it is a, maybe alternative, not the best word, but it is the de facto tonic of the piece. So even though we're in the key of C, the listener, from a listening perspective, we really hear the key of C minor from the perspective of the G. So there are two concepts that exist at the same time. Now, this is something that nobody's going to teach you, okay, ever. I defy anyone to discuss this, but there are two keys operating at the same time. There is the key of C minor and the key of G Phrygian. Now, they're in gradations. Imagine like a camera lens that's going in and out of focus, let's say, or you have like a depth of field where the background's a little out of focus. That's what we have here. So we have the camera focusing in on the Phrygian scale, maybe, let's just pick a number, 60%, and the C minor is at 40%. And that's what creates the tension in the composition. And you can find this in any great work, either a simple song or a great piece of classical music. And it's the job of the musician to recognize this point of leverage in the piece. And separate from learning the chords, separate from learning the scales, separate from learning the notes, separate from learning the fingerings, it's the heuristic, it's the rule of thumb, it's the overarching idea in the piece. So when you go to improvise, you're approaching the key C minor from that vantage point. Otherwise, your improvisation, not you personally, right, but my improvisation, anyone's improvisation, is going to sound out of place. It's not going to reflect and amplify and elucidate the composition. I mean, improvisation is not a meandering, ideally, right? Although we all fall in that trap, right? But it's supposed to be an elucidation of the piece from a different vantage point or from the vantage point of the piece. That's really what we're after. But otherwise, it ends up sounding stilted and unrelated or mechanical or simplistic, and that tension isn't there in the piece. So we learn these scales so that we can train ourselves to think about a problem in more than one way, to develop some flexibility, some plasticity of thought. And nobody really plays in the key of G Phrygian. Okay, there are really no pieces typically written in a Phrygian key. And even if they were, even the words we use now to describe Phrygian are vastly different than, say, what the ancient Greeks thought a Phrygian scale was. But we use it. It's a means, it's a lens by which we can view the piece and discuss it and kind of hold it in our minds, because music is very abstract, right? I mean, it's just air. It's just, right? It's just, you can't really hold on to it. So it's a challenge. That's the thing that makes playing music so hard, is that, we have to somehow make this process concrete. Now, you could say, well, I don't need to read music and I don't need to know music theory and blah, blah, blah. Well, good luck. I'm sorry, okay? I really, in my whole life, I could count all the people I've met that don't know anything about music that actually play really well. I can count them on one hand. And typically, the people that are very talented, say more talented than usual, they go off on the deep end. They somehow, I don't know, they almost appear to be insane. I can think of people who say they know nothing about music, like Monty Alexander, whom I'm sure if you really talk to, he knows something about music, but he doesn't, that's not really his thing, teaching or, reading music. Or like, say, George Benson, or, there were other people, but that's just not the rule. I mean, Charlie Parker literally walked around with a copy of Stravinsky's Rite of Spring in his back pocket. Or am I thinking of John Coltrane? No, I think I'm thinking of Charlie Parker. That was a story. That's a story that I read. Duke Ellington. I mean, these are very studious people, okay? So I just don't think it's realistic to be able to, if you have any aspirations to play music at a level that's satisfying, and to play music of great composers, and to play music on a level that, would be on par with these people. I mean, it's very hard to do it without becoming educated. So having taught for many, 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 many years, and having gone to school for many, many, many years, and having to make my living teaching people, I really genuinely wanted to come up with something that really would encapsulate in the most concise possible way the essence of music. And this is what I came up with. And I was originally, I'll just kind of have a little sidebar here. So I was originally inspired with my lessons with Mark Westcott. So some of you may know Mark Westcott. He was a bronze medal winner in the Van Cliburn competition many years ago. He passed away not too long ago. And he was a brilliant pianist and a brilliant teacher, actually. And one of the things we discussed when I first started studying with him was the use of tetrachords. This is how he would teach little kids to play scales. He called doggy paddle, right? But he would take a major tetrachord, and then you replace your right hand with your left hand, play the same tetrachord, and go up the keyboard or go and with the same fingers. Why? Why the same fingers? And why not the thumb? Well, keyboard players didn't originally use the thumb. You don't need to use the thumb. But there are two problems when you're playing. There's a musical problem, and then there's the physical problem that's unique to your instrument. And you don't want the fingering, the physicality of it, to muddy the waters and confuse the issue of the musical problem. I was teaching this to a guitarist the other day, and I went through all the tetrachords with him, and then he brings over this page of fingerings to me. And I'm like, look, that's all well and good. I'm not interested. I don't play guitar. I'm not interested in your fingerings. And I had him play all the scales with one finger. So on the guitar, one finger all the way up and down, 4 notes, and then use the middle finger, one finger all the way up and down. Now, each time you do that, it goes into your brain in a different way, all right? But again, you are minimizing, you are detaching the physical problem from the musical problem. And if one goes immediately, as they love, as they get kids to do, and all these scale books, they have them using these fingers right away, I think that's a big mistake, because you're really confusing yourself, okay, by doing that. So that's just a little sidebar about technique. And by the way, practicing with one finger on the piano is something I got from Mark. but it's very useful from a technical standpoint because you learn to connect notes by using your arm weight and your shoulder weight. And it's always a balancing act when you're playing the keyboard, because between articulation and tone. So usually when you hear pianists play, usually you hear great articulation. Let's just one exaggeration. On one side you hear great articulation and a million notes, right? But there's no substance, there's no tone, and there's no phrasing. Or you hear maybe a big sound, but they're sloppy, they really can't play passages cleanly. So you have to learn how to do both, which is really challenging. I mean, to be able to balance those two elements. And when you're learning to say play an arpeggio with one finger or fourth finger and connect the notes, that's actually very freeing, a very freeing way to play. And then you can go back and dial in the granularity of the playing, okay? But you also have to play, and this is another word Mark would use sometimes, you have to practice it in an industrial manner. So you have to kind of use the big muscles. You have to train the big muscles to do the little things. And you have to train the little muscles to do bigger things. But that was the balancing act. So this going back to the tune, what's in it? What's in for you in terms of playing tunes? When you approach the keyboard, you kind of grab these sounds, right? You grab, and also in between those sounds as well, you have other. I mean, between this and this, if I start on the third, what scale is that? Well, that's a major tetrachord, right? Root, third, fifth. Yeah? So, now, it changes key, right? Well, that's just, anyway, that's just D flat major. It's really an E flat Dorian is what it is. Or if you want to think of it as, another Phrygian mode, F Phrygian. So it's this, and it's this. Excuse me. I told you the wrong thing. It's this, or did I? And it's this. Yeah, that's right. It is. It's F Phrygian, right? It's the notes of the D flat scale starting on F. This is yeah. Right. So one, in one, the root of the scale functions as the fifth of the chord, right? In the other one, let's call it the root. It's hard to distinguish a root, but that's where the phrase comes to rest. That's the third of the D flat, right? So 5, and then suspension, resolution, right? That's the basis of the tune. So that's a method of trying to understand, trying to get your head around how the tune is written. Because guess what? I didn't write it. You didn't write it, right? Somebody else wrote it. But, when you learn a piece of music, you have to ideally get to the point where it's as if you were the one that wrote it, right? So it's more than just memorizing, right? Or just learning a chord or a scale. It has to become a part of you. And that takes a lifetime, and it evolves, the piece evolves, and I could show you other examples of that. There's a very interesting example I could show you with All the Things You Are, which would take much more time, and I think I'm going to save that for next week. All the Things You Are is a great example because you have chords that are constantly changing, right? And so where the chords are constantly changing, you have to find some type of a constant in that, some type of the axle, call it an axle, upon which the wheel spins. So even though it appears as if the music is changing, that's really not the case. It's merely the perspective that you're hearing it from. So if you hear like 6, 2, 5, 1, right? That's All the Things You Are. F minor, B flat minor, E flat 7, G, but the whole point of leverage is really A flat. It's really A flat. Or there's more than one right answer. It could be potentially E flat. And that scale it's Mixolydian. Or it could be, and I think this is maybe a better answer, this is an odd piece. It ends up going to C. So I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but you could say to yourself, okay, what's the common tone in all that big mess of chords, right? Well, you think about it a bit. You could think about it intellectually. It has to sound good. I hear G. Right? Just like the fifth. That's the sneaky thing about All the Things You Are, is that even though it's written in A flat, it actually comes to rest in the key of C, but the point of leverage is not C, it's G. So you have 3 things to think of now. 3 tonalities stacked kind of like little Russian dolls in one another, That's the 3-dimensional telescopic quality. That's the DNA of the tune. If you've ever heard anyone discuss music like this, let me know, because I haven't. Okay. Well, there probably is somebody, I guess. So I think we've run out of time, but that was fun. I enjoy talking to you guys in this manner. But please, again, write in. I will continue the discussion next week. If it's just a bunch of nonsense, well, you can let me know that too. And but keep challenging me and push me forward. That's the fun of teaching. So anyway, till next time, this is Jonathan, Piano Lesson, signing off. Have a great week. And a very nice St. Patrick's Day. Today's St. Patrick's Day, but you probably won't see this for another few days. But what the heck. Bye-bye.